Media. There's a huge amount of suffering that is generated not by the actual challenges of life, but by the fictitious problems that the mind creates. Eckhart Tolle. Let's get into it.
Hi, my name is Ronnie Cruz. After almost 2 decades as a career network marketer, I realized that despite continual work on my personal and professional development, that I had hit a massive brick wall. So I took a deep and honest look at myself, top to bottom, hoping to find answers, and my search led me to one conclusion. The definitions I held of my business, of my world, of my life were the very things holding me back. If I wanted to change, if I wanted to grow beyond my current circumstances, I had to wipe the slate clean and redefine. This show is dedicated to helping you identify the belief systems, the mindsets, the very definitions that have held you back, and then help you break through those limitations to finally create the life you've been working so hard to achieve. Welcome to the Redefine Podcast.
Okay, happy podcast day. Happy podcast day to you. Welcome to the show if you're brand new. And of course, if you're an existing listener, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I want to ask real quick before we get into today's episode, subscribe. It'll just, it's for me. Well, it would help the show out, of course. If you subscribe, it tells the algorithms that people actually want to listen to this content. And so the more subscribers we have, the better. So if whatever app you happen to be listening to this podcast on, hit that plus sign. And of course, if you're watching the YouTube video version, hit the subscribe button. I really would appreciate it. Well, it's just, to get these principles out to more people who it could potentially help. I mean, if you find value in it, if it's helping you, not only will you continue to get new episodes every Tuesday and Thursdays, but again, we could potentially help more people. So please subscribe. Okay, that said, let's get into today's topic. I have to admit that my head is still, I don't want to say it's been difficult, but I haven't, my head just hasn't been on content creation, right? I haven't had my head on like planning out my topics and my content here for the show, because it's been preoccupied with everything Hurricane Helene and with the relief efforts here in Western North Carolina and all the other stuff that's kind of happening around the events of Hurricane Helene. I mean, of course, I'm trying to focus on the relief efforts, and I will share with you a link in this episode to that I'm raising funds for here in the local area. But there's a lot of nonsense, and there's a lot of chatter, and there's a lot of fictitious narratives that's causing more suffering. So the quote today is from Eckhart Tolle that I wanted to reference, and the inspiration for today's episode came from this quote, because again, it's very applicable to what's happening here in Western North Carolina, but it is also an amazing principle for day-to-day living, right? For a principle that you can use with you throughout your life to help you cultivate less suffering, to cultivate more growth, right? So the quote again is this: "There's a huge amount of suffering that is generated not by the actual challenges of life, but by the fictitious problems that the mind creates." So let's unpack that a little bit. So first of all, there are certainly external problems, right? External challenges and adversities that we all face. That's part of the human experience, right? We all experience suffering that's caused by external circumstances. That's just part of the suffering that we face, though, as humans. The other part of the suffering that we experience is directly caused by the narratives that we weave, right? For example, you go through some sort of adversity. Well, a good example is anxiety, right? Anxiety. Something might have happened to you in the past that causes you to be anxious about things in the future. But you see that initial event or challenge is done. It's in the past, but you're worried about stuff happening or it happening again in the future is causing you more suffering. So the initial event, external circumstance might have caused you suffering then, but it's your mind, it's the narratives that you weave that's causing you ongoing suffering. And potentially because you're vibrating in that frequency will actually create more external circumstances to create more suffering, and then it just kind of perpetuates itself, right? It's a never-ending circle. So that's really what happens in the human experience, and what we have to do is, if we want to remedy that, is listen to this quote, and raise your awareness around it, right? Be aware that the suffering that you are experiencing or might experience in life is your thought patterns and the narratives contribute to that suffering just as much, if not more, than the external circumstance itself, right? The challenge or the adversity itself. And so it is the first place to start is to raise that self-awareness, and to really have a high level of not high, to continue to work on introspection and really self-examination, right? And raising that level of awareness of your emotional state in the moment, knowing that, okay, I'm experiencing, a heightened negative emotional state. So I have to pause then. So the next step, take a breath so that you don't react in an emotional state. Because what happens when you react in an emotional state is that you may think you're acting logically and you're being rational, but it's not that part of the brain that's actually doing the thinking. It's the protective autopilot side of the brain that is running on programming, and that's creating narratives and thought patterns that are based on something that happened in the past that might have protected you then, but might not be protecting you now, especially if it's causing more suffering, right? So raising that level of awareness of your emotional state, and there's nothing wrong with emotions. Emotions are okay. Emotions are good because they give us information. Emotion is data. Use that data. In order to be able to use that data, of course, again, take a breath and take a pause, but use that data then to really ask yourself some hard questions. Okay, so what am I telling myself about this situation that's making it harder for me and creating more of this same emotion? Because the event is done. Why am I still suffering? And then do your best once you've asked yourself those hard questions, to redefine, right? Reframe the narratives. It's just redefining the situation for yourself. Stop defining it in a way that's creating more suffering for you, and redefine it in a way that maybe is more empowering. Give yourself more empowerment. Taking radical responsibility for one is tremendously empowering. You may admit those things may not be your fault, but you're responsible for how you react, right? And so if you take that level of responsibility, then you take control of how things unfold moving forward, and you take control of your own whether you're going to suffer or not moving forward, right? Whether you're going to experience more suffering moving forward, especially at the hands of your own fictitious narratives. Right. So that's really the process. Again, it's raising your awareness, taking a breath, taking a pause, and then examining. Take a deep dive into your emotional state and ask yourself, what narratives am I telling myself? What narratives are going on that's creating more of these negative emotional states? And then adjust, redefine, rewrite those narratives, right? Reframe those narratives. Now, in terms of like the fictitious side of it, this quote in general, I wanted to talk about this because it really, really applies to what's going on here in Western North Carolina post Hurricane Helene. Again, I told you, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, my head is still very much on Helene and the relief and the aftermath. So there's obviously the initial calamity, right? The destruction, the devastation, and then the cleanup, the relief efforts, the getting people supplies, getting people aid, and things like that. That is still very much in process. We've gotten a lot of great help from across the board, right? The federal response has been amazing. The state and local response has been amazing. Even the grassroots within the community, the response has been absolutely incredible, and we're still working through it. And so there's just external kind of adversity and challenge that's happening, and collective suffering, to be honest. I mean, it was devastating what this hurricane did in this region. However, on top of that, there are narratives that are floating around the ether that have caused even more suffering. And this is why this is important, right? This is why this is important, to really get a handle on your own emotional state and realizing that your narratives are causing more suffering, because we're inundated by information left and right. You don't even have to go through a particular adversity or challenge in order to be triggered into an emotional state. You can just be scrolling on social media. You can read a piece of information that raises your emotional state, create some well, that kicks you into, to an autopilot side of your brain, into that protective part of your brain, and that weaves negative narratives and false narratives, and that creates more suffering, right? So you don't actually have to go through, this natural disaster and the devastation to have a negative emotional reaction and suffer and suffering. All you have to do is get on social media, right? And we all know that social media is, well, it's a cesspool of false information. I mean, there's great information there, but it's also a place where there's a lot of intentional misinformation. And what this intentional misinformation has done, specifically with this situation here in Western North Carolina, is that it has created more suffering. It's made getting aid and relief to people that need it the most that much more difficult. And I'm going to talk about specifically the false narratives, the patently false narratives that were intentionally put out there into the world about the FEMA response, right? FEMA has been great. They've been on the ground for weeks now. They're helping wherever they can. I understand that for individual needs, it can be a process because it's government, right? So there's a multi-step process that you have to go through to get aid. But their initial relief response was amazing. Again, it really, really, as a whole, they've done a wonderful job. Counter to that is the false narrative that was intentionally put out into the world that they're not doing anything, that we're only getting $750 and that's it, and that FEMA funding is going elsewhere to places that don't serve any interest for federal emergency management. Completely false narratives, and again, intentionally put out there for political reasons. However, it was enough of a seed to plant in people's heads that has created so much dissonance and so much negative emotional states in people that it just then kind of boils and stews to the point where now there are reports today that there are armed militias going out into the communities in Western North Carolina and targeting FEMA representatives and FEMA employees. How insane is that, right? Again, these narratives, these challenges and these problems created, fictitious problems created by the mind, is creating more suffering in the community, actually real suffering in the community. And so, and regardless, even if any of those false accusations about FEMA had a glimmer of truth on it, it doesn't merit the response, because the stewing in the once that seed is planted, it stews and stews, and it just grows and grows and grows in the person's mind to the point where they want to take action and take violent action against another human being, right? And that's all in the mind. Because that the individuals that are doing this, these militia people, could have just as easily taken a pause, taken a breath. Yes, the stories that they might have seen online about FEMA not responding or whatever, they could have created a heightened emotional state in themselves. But if they had just been aware enough, if they had taken enough pause to examine and really think through the process of what they're going through emotionally, they could frame it for themselves and be like, okay, that, what I'm thinking about doing may not be the smartest thing to do. And it's not happening across the board necessarily. It's not like anarchy out here by any stretch of the imagination. However, it's newsworthy enough to have landed on my desk or on my feed, because I live here in Western North Carolina. And again, you can trace the roots back to this kind of behavior, to the fictitious problems that's created in the mind. Obviously, there was a fictitious narrative that was intentionally put out there in the world, but people had to kind of buy into that in order for them to then, digest it and stew on it and cook it and boil it until they go act out on it. Right. So again, really, really important. We're inundated with information. We're inundated with things that will create a heightened negative emotional state, and we don't have to actually even go through external adversity and challenges. We don't have to be the ones to go through them in order for us to start for us to be in these heightened emotional states. And so this work that we have, that I talked about today, these principles and this step, this self kind of introspection and self-examination is so important. It's so important that we have to really increase our self-awareness to the point, and that we can protect ourselves from being influenced by the inundation of information, and protect ourselves from ourselves. Ultimately, is what this quote is talking about, because we will, if we don't, we will create more suffering for ourselves, and we will create more suffering for our fellow people, right? We will create more suffering in the world. All right. So yeah, really important, really important. So much suffering so much of suffering is caused by the fictitious problems you create in your mind. And so you have to raise your awareness, take a breath, use your emotions as information and data, and then rewrite the narrative, right? Reframe the narrative, redefine, so that you cause less suffering for yourself and the world around you. All right, that's it. Now, speaking of suffering, I will ask again for your help. Very much still in relief mode here, relief and recovery here in Western North Carolina. So what I've done is I've actually started a GoFundMe, and I will be distributing once the GoFundMe is done, I'll be distributing whatever I collect to 3 different relief organizations: Hot Spring Recovery, Help Marshall, and Beloved Asheville. Those are the 3 that I've chosen. They're all vetted, but if you want to check them out, you can. I will leave the link to my GoFundMe in the show notes of this episode, as well as in the description of this video. So please contribute what you can. No amount is too small, as we say. No amount is too big. We're going to be in need of contributions and help for weeks and months and even years to come, but especially in the immediate months here, coming up. It's going to start to get colder. The donations are actually going to start to trickle and slow down, but they're still going to be needed, right? Physical supplies, of course, will always be in demand, but especially, of course, monetary donations will be needed as well. So the ongoing help is appreciated. Click on the GoFundMe and donate what you can. We need the help here in Western North Carolina, and it's been great. Like I said, it has been amazing. There's people from all over the country that have been setting up collections for physical donations and supplies, and that's been wonderful. I see the outpouring of compassion and help, that's coming into this area from all over the world, and I really appreciate it. I know I don't speak on behalf of the entire region, but I know everybody feels the love and appreciate the help that you guys are giving, and we ask that you continue that, right? Continue that outpouring of help and support. So that's gonna do it. That's gonna do it for today. So I will catch you on Thursday with a fresh new one. So until then, be well, be safe. We'll see you in the next episode.